Hello and welcome to our fifth and final dinosaur dozen, the thyreophorans, the armored ones. Struthiosaurus was a tiny armored plant eater. It probably lived on small islands surrounding what's now the Mediterranean Sea, and the fact that it was armored means there must also have been miniature tyrannosaurs or raptors living in the area. It lived in Europe in the late Cretaceous, 85 to 65 million years ago. Scelidosaurus was one of the earliest and most primitive armored dinosaurs. Its head was much narrower than its later relatives, and its neck was longer. It may have been able to stand on its hind legs to reach higher leaves and shrubs to eat. It lived in England and the USA in the early Jurassic, 191 million years ago. Silvisaurus belonged to the Nodosaurid family, which looked very similar to the Ankylosaurs but didn't have tail clubs. It may have been an especially primitive member of the family, since it had teeth at the front of its jaw instead of a toothless beak like its other relatives. It lived in the USA in the mid-Cretaceous, 96 to 93 million years ago. Polacanthus was a squat plant eater. It had a huge fused shield of armored bone over its hips and several sets of spikes running the length of its body. As well as one of the most primitive nodosaurids, it's also one of the longest known, discovered in England in 1865. It lived in Western Europe in the early Cretaceous, 130 to 125 million years ago. Sauropelta was among the biggest of the nodosaurids. Its long tail made up nearly half its total body length, and like all nodosaurids, didn't have a heavy club on the end. Its back was covered with armor bumps and spikes, and large sharp spines lined the length of its body. It lived in the USA in the mid-Cretaceous, 108 million years ago. Kentrosaurus, like all stegosaurs, ate plants and had two rows of plates running down its back. But a double row of long spines replaced the plates at the hips and ran all the way down its tail, which would have made for a deadly weapon against attacking meat eaters. It lived in Tanzania in the late Jurassic, 152 million years ago. Nodosaurus was one of the first armored dinosaurs to be discovered in North America. It had bony scutes covering the top of its body, and may have had spikes running along its sides as well. It probably defended itself by hugging the ground to protect its soft underbelly, like modern hedgehogs. It lived in the USA in the mid-Cretaceous, 100 to 97 million years ago. Euoplocephalus is one of the best known of the ankylosaurs. Its back and flanks were covered with bands of tough bony plates and spikes, including a pair of spikes sticking up from its shoulders. Even its eyelids were armored. It lived in North America in the late Cretaceous, 76 to 75 million years ago. Edmontonia was a bulky, tank-like dinosaur covered in bony scutes and spikes. Its four largest spikes jutted out from each side of its shoulders, which would have protected the animal from predators as it foraged for low-growing plants to eat. It lived in North America in the late Cretaceous, 76 to 65 million years ago. Tuojiangosaurus appears to be one of the most primitive stegosaurs known. The plates running in two rows down its back were simple triangle shapes and weren't as large and impressive as those found in its American cousin Stegosaurus. It lived in China in the late Jurassic, 160 million years ago. Stegosaurus is probably the best known armored dinosaur. It had four long spikes on the end of its tail, which were its main defense. Some people believe that the huge plates on the back of Stegosaurus were brightly colored to frighten rivals and attract mates. It lived in the USA in the late Jurassic, 155 to 150 million years ago. And finally, Ankylosaurus was probably the largest armored dinosaur. It was a slow-moving behemoth that lived on a diet of plants. Its back was tightly covered with armor plates, and its tail ended in a large club that could easily break the leg of any attacking tyrannosaur. It lived in North America in the late Cretaceous, 68 to 65 million years ago. And that's the end of our Dinosaur Dozens. Thank you so much for watching them, and I'll see you next time.